What would you do if you woke up one morning and the life you'd worked your whole existence to protect was about to get bulldozed, literally, by a bunch of millionaires with more money than sense? That's exactly where I found myself standing barefoot on my porch, clutching a chipped coffee mug, staring at a horizon that was vanishing one tree at a time. Yeah, that happened. Bulldozers at 600 a.m. The kind that rattle your bones and drown out the birds chewing up the land my granddad fought hurricanes to build on just so somebody could sell ocean views to people who'd never even got sand between their toes. But here's what those folks didn't know. I'm not the kind of guy you can scare off with a letter or a lawsuit. I had a plan, and let's just say money can't fix stupid. The first time I realized this was more than construction, I walked outside in my pajamas, looked at the survey stakes everywhere, and saw the old oaks going down like bowling pins. My family's house, built back when you could fish for your supper, was about to be hemmed in by a wall of million-dollar mansions. They called it Ocean View Estates, like naming a landfill Hope Meadows. I could see it right away, 150 luxury homes each, promising unobstructed views that ironically would block out the only real view anybody ever had. They were laying down artificial rivers and koi ponds and calling it paradise, but all I saw was the end of everything that made this place special. I marched down to the work site, hoping I could talk to someone who'd give a damn. The project manager, a guy who looked like his soul had been power washed by HR, just shrugged. Progress, he said, like that word could buy back history. Within 2 days, a notice showed up in my mailbox. The public beach path was closed for safety. You know that feeling when your stomach drops like you missed the last step in the dark? That was me, because that path was more than a shortcut. It was the route my grandfather had cleared, where my dad taught me to fish, where I'd even proposed once back before life got complicated. And now some clipboard-wielding assistant was telling me it was private property. Go find another beach. That's when I met Tom from 3 doors down, a quiet guy always mowing his lawn at weird hours. Turns out he'd seen this game before. Anyone who doesn't sell gets harassed, he said, staring at the dust cloud rising from the bulldozers. They hit you with complaints, lawsuits, whatever it takes. He rattled off names of families who'd finally caved after years of hell, bad enough to make a grown man want to burn the whole thing down. I realized quick this wasn't just construction. It was a corporate siege, one house at a time, squeezing regular folks until the last one gave up. But they hadn't met me. I'm Evan Carter, 20 years as a plumber. I know this land, and I know how everything under it works. Sewage, water, electricity, the whole ecosystem that keeps the lights on and the toilets flushing. So I decided to fight back. First, I planted a row of 20 pine trees right along my property line. Cost me a month's wages, and left my hands looking like I'd gone 12 rounds with a cactus, but it gave me a living green wall between my house and that endless construction zone. For about 3 days I was proud until she showed up. Now, I'm not the type to judge a book by its cover, but Susan Green. Yeah, you could tell trouble by the way she walked. HOA president power suit that probably cost more than my pickup. You'll have to remove those trees, she said, staring down her nose like she expected me to salute. I told her politely at first that they were on my property inside the line, and that any neighbor with a lick of sense would be happy to see something green growing for a change. But no, they were blocking her residence' ocean views. That's right, trees on my land blocking the imaginary views of houses that hadn't even been built yet. It'd be funny if it wasn't so twisted. She handed me a formal letter, all legalese and threats, claiming neighborhood ordinances that didn't exist. She tried to stare me down, but I've dealt with enough city inspectors in my time to know a bluff when I see it. I did my research. Turns out her HOA had zero authority over my property. Still, that night, somebody poisoned 8 of my pines. I caught the whole thing on my security camera, 2 goons at 2 a.m. with spray bottles killing what I'd spent weeks building. That was their warning shot. So I called Frank, my old college buddy, and now a lawyer who doesn't scare easy. He fired off a cease and desist and threatened criminal charges. The HOA paused for a beat, but Susan, she doubled down, calling me to say, "You might have won this round, but it isn't over." The next morning, my water was shut off. Not just low pressure, completely dead. Checked the main valve, padlocked and sealed professionally. That's not a mistake, that's a message. Surrender or suffer. Thing is, they messed with the wrong plumber. I spent hours at the county office pulling up blueprints, permits, everything. Then I drove over to see Harold Wayne, a legend, in our trade, retired, but still sharper than half the city council put together. His granddaughter, turns out, got run out the same way by this HOA, forced to sell her inheritance for pennies. Harold's been waiting years to see them get theirs. He showed me something wild, their whole fake paradise, the rivers, fountains, fancy irrigation, all fed by one master valve, located right on the edge of my property. The irony was too good. We hatched a plan. That Saturday night, after making sure the coast was clear, Harold and I crept in like we were starring in our own spy movie. I'd never been so scared in my life, knees shaking, heart pounding. But we cracked the lock, and after a nail-biting crawl across security cameras and decorative rocks, found the secondary valve just where Harold said it'd be. With some subtle adjustments, nothing that could be blamed on outright sabotage, we cut the water pressure by a third. By morning, their fountains trickled, the koi were flopping in puddles, and the whole complex was in panic mode. Maintenance workers ran around like ants in a rainstorm while Susan screamed at her staff, blaming everyone but herself. Day after day, the problems mounted. Algae stank up the artificial rivers. Residents filed complaints. Property values nosedived. Lawsuits flew at the HOA, not at me. Contractors wanted money for repairs that never worked. Through it all, Susan stalked around like a general losing a war, her meltdown going viral among the residents. I felt a little guilty, then remembered how it felt to have my water cut off and my trees poisoned. But I knew it was coming to a head when 2 police cruisers pulled up, and Susan, wild-eyed, demanded my arrest for sabotage. The cops saw right through her, especially after Frank showed up, maps and deeds in hand, proving the valve was on my land. Next thing, the cops are asking Susan to explain why she shut off my water and why her organization's been hit with 6 harassment complaints in 2 years. You ever see the look on someone's face when they realize the game's up priceless? Of course she wasn't done. We ended up in court, Susan and her big-shot lawyer spinning tales about sabotage, me and Frank with the truth and one more ace up our sleeve. Right when the judge started to waver, Frank slid the property maps across the table, showing the valve was within my rights. I texted Harold the signal. Minutes later, emergency sirens blared as water surged back into Ocean View Estates, flooding their rivers, overflowing fountains, and turning $50 million mansions into indoor swimming pools. The courtroom emptied in chaos. Susan fainted on the spot. Judge Thompson, barely hiding his satisfaction, declared the dispute naturally resolved. The HOA tanked, Susan was booted, property values collapsed. And for the first time in months, I got my view and my peace back. These days, I sit on my porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over what's now a lake where the mansions used to be. You tell me, was it justice, revenge, or just standing up for what's right when no one else will drop your thoughts? Below, argue about justice, property rights, whatever. I want to hear what you'd have done. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Never pick a fight with a plumber who knows where the water comes from.